Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called Replace with AI. I own a managed service provider firm, which provides cloud computing services to clients. Business is good enough to pay my employees a respectable wage, while offering them a good work-life balance. I have never had to lay off a single employee yet. I hired a senior IT technician as a middle manager, Harry. Harry seems to have gone off the rails about AI. He has started to micromonitor our co-workers to an unacceptable extent, and he has kept on pestering me to investigate how I could use AI technologies to reduce employee costs. Frankly, this rubbed me the wrong way. Harry does not have a stake in any of his co-workers losing their jobs, and his constant micromonitoring had become an issue. Plus, I have had a look at one, and there is simply no way it could replace any of my technical employees. It has no agency, nor can it deal with clients, nor can it see the computer screen to troubleshoot. However, it could easily replace a middle manager, assuming someone else takes on some additional responsibility daily. It has certain plugins in a code interpreter mode, which can do calculations and process spreadsheets as input-output. This can decimate the workload of a middle manager, at least in our firm, allowing their responsibilities to be absorbed by another senior employee, me in this case. I kept this in mind and have been shadowing Harry's job for the past few months. A stellar employee retired last week. I approached Harry and told him that I took his suggestions to heart and have decided to automate his role with AI. I told him he could accept his redundancy package or be retrained in Azure. He chose to be retrained in Azure. Unfortunately for Harry, he'll lose the comfy privileges being a middle manager entails. Fortunately for our co-workers, they will have an impartial AI making decisions. Fortunately for me, I won't have to pay for a redundant role. The next story is called Cooked Up at Work. I have a second to senior position in my department at work, so theoretically, I have my choice of station to go to when I come in, as long as my senior doesn't want it. My senior co-worker has a station she always goes to, and it's understood that she likes the third station and I like the 7th station. Our stations are even denoted by personal items and magnets. My station is preferred because I have medical issues with overheating, and the floor fan points at that location. My personal items at that station include a backup fan, in case the big one just isn't enough. This fan is way quieter than the big fan. The new manager complains about the noise of the big one. I have poor hearing and it doesn't bug me. Recently, the new manager has started stealing my station because the fan in it is quieter when everyone knows there's a preference. Whatever, it's the least awful thing she's done, so it doesn't matter much to me, as long as I'm not there to need the station. Where she crosses the line is stealing my station right at the start of my shift. I asked her if I could have my station, since there are plenty of open stations, and she says, "No, you need to be able to work at any station." Knowing that I have an agreement with the office, that I can always have the floor fan on if I need it, I start to get some ideas and question, can I have my personal fan for my things first? She quickly gives me that awful manager who thinks they are God face. "No, go to your station now and start typing, or I'll write you up for not starting on time." I comply like the peaceful worker drone I am, and click on the big fan while going to the station right next to her. At this point, I'm already sweating, but I'm close enough to the fan that I won't pass out. Just then, she clicks the fan off, and I sluggishly click it back on. It goes on and on for a whole hour, but at this point I'm seeing spots, so I give her a heads up. The office says the fan stays on if I need it on. She goes to click it right back off. I don't care, this thing is too loud. I'm almost office staff anyways, and things will change around here soon. Within the next 2 hours, I'm unresponsive due to heat sickness. At this point, I've been magically placed in a medical unit for a few hours. I don't know how I got there or who called, but my girlfriend brought my things from work. How she got out of the managers was that I'm dismissed for a few days. All I know right now is that the new manager has a paradigm report to worry about, and I hopefully get my spot from now on. The third story is called Zero Idle Time. This happened a few years ago. My sister's company went to work from home after the lockdown and stayed working from home. At first they required an always-on camera system, but that quickly went away, as the amount of unattended views that comes from your average household is quite startling. Then they went with a system that tracks your idle time in Teams. The amount of write-ups, meetings, group meetings, and eventual terminations, for what was the dumbest requirement ever, caused my sister to ask for help. She sent me an Amazon link for one of those USB sticks that jiggles the mouse. I told her don't use those, as even lazy IT can detect them. At the time, Amazon wasn't selling mechanical mouse turners yet, or at least at a reasonable price, so I looked at building one. After 3D printing it, the mouse cursor would randomly just move in weird directions at the times, just like intended. I got a free lunch from my sister and delivered it. It hooked into her laptop's USB port, never being detected, and would turn her real, decreasing her idle time down to 0. Within 2 weeks, she was recognized as a top performer. She was watching crime dramas with her volume at max, until she got a notification that a customer submitted a request. In other words, her productivity stayed exactly the same. So she calls me up and asks if I can make more of those. Thankfully, I saved the files and could order more of the rest if needed. I told her I could make each one for 25 bucks. The cheapest on Amazon at the time were like 50, and it only cost me roughly 12 bucks to make them, which went down to 8 bucks to make them at the end. She said several co-workers were asking her about it, and she said she would just give them my number. Within a month, I had built out 50 mechanical mouse turners, which was kind of a waste, as this company only had 32 employees. I miscounted. Sometimes I would meet 5 or more of her co-workers at a restaurant at the same time, just so I wouldn't have to drive all over town. Then, one weekend, I get a call from the CEO of that company. All of his workers were using these mouse turners, and he wasn't. So when the company published the report on idle times, his was abysmally low. That phone call was one of the most surreal I have ever had. At first, he thought I was one of his employees. I told him I wasn't. I worked for a waste management company. I don't, but I wasn't about to tell him. He asked me about the mouse turners. I told him that I designed them for a friend, but that person no longer worked for his company. Again, lies. I was protecting my sister. Not like he couldn't figure it out, but still. He asked if he could get one. This is where the conversation went very weird. I tried convincing him to give up the idle timer requirements, as it clearly wasn't important and only harmed his company. I laid out all of my points for it and pointed out that the CEO of the company is buying a device specifically designed to bypass his requirement. He wouldn't budge. He was so into his company dogma that he just wanted one from me. I already had a few left over, so I told him I could make him one for 35 bucks. Here is the really messed up part of the story. He asked for a full list of my clients, promising that no one would be fired. He just wanted to know how many. I told him that a list would be unnecessary, as it's every single one of his employees. Literally all 32, excluding him. His response was to have the company reimburse each employee the $25 for the mouse turners, and set it up where his company would contact me each time a new employee started. I said I had 10 left over from the initial batch of ones I made, and can just give him those, and have him contact me when he wants out. He agreed. That kind of never happened, as a company on Amazon made what is basically the same thing I was making, for like 15 bucks. Theirs is much nicer than mine was too. The last story is called Document Everything. I worked as a writer and editor for over a decade, and in that time I had my fair share of bad bosses. Like anyone. But there's one that completely takes the cake. I worked for a large media company that had dealings with a number of other companies and subsidiaries ranging from publishing to fashion to sports to tech. You name it, they did it. How our writing department worked was, each writer would have specific areas that they would write for, kind of like how journalists have beats they cover. So if you were assigned to the fashion arm of the company, or one of its partners/subsidiaries, you wrote or edited everything for that arm. I worked for this company for about a year and a half, before a new manager was hired. She was the second in command of our department. Part of her and our department's director's job was to update our internal style guide when necessary. A style guide is a reference document for how to either refer to things or how to format things for the company and partners. Before her tenure as manager, this was only done maybe once or twice a year, and the changes were relatively minimal, since the style guide was very well established in the company and had been in place for a number of years. After she came on, it was being updated at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. It legitimately became an obsession for her. Aside from the general annoyance of keeping up with it, it didn't take long for me and my coworkers to reach the conclusion that our new manager didn't have the faintest idea what she was doing. Each new version had more and more glaring errors. At first we all ignored these changes, giving her the benefit of the doubt, and hoping, albeit naively, that these new directives were mistakes. That was until people started getting reprimanded for not following the style guide. I was the first one to get a one-on-one, closed-door talk. One of the departments I wrote for was sports, and she had seen that I had not been following the new rule of how I was to refer to the men's and women's teams I covered. Truthfully, I had willfully ignored it, hoping that it was just a mistake. To my horror, however, it appeared my new writing manager didn't understand basic grammar. The change she implemented removed the apostrophe from men's and women's. The rationale was that the man didn't own the team, therefore it should not be possessive. Apparently, her understanding of the English language didn't evolve past grade school explanations. I was honestly pretty dumbfounded at first. I tried bleakly to explain that man is already plural, and that a possessive s doesn't always denote direct ownership. She stared blankly at me for a few seconds, and for the briefest of moments, I thought maybe I was seeing the cogs in her head turn. She, however, doubled down. Realizing the fight was lost, I told her that I would implement the changes going forward. We worked for and with some very high-profile companies, and mistakes were not tolerated for things that were outward-facing. Realizing her idiocy could cost me my job, I made a simple request. Could you please email me the exact style guide rule you are referencing, and how exactly you'd like me to implement it, with examples of where I messed up? She looked at me like I was stupid for not understanding what was being asked of me, but she still wrote it all down in an email for me. I also made sure any further style changes were referenced in an email, and specifically asked that if there were further changes, to please cite how I had done them in the past, along with how she would like them to be done from now on. Sure enough, within about 6 months of this, I was fired. And in my exit interview, I handed HR a folder containing every written communication regarding the style changes, along with quite a bit of evidence that she was passing off her projects to other members of the department and changing people's work behind their back. She was fired 3 months after me, along with our department director 3 months after that. Turns out my little folder sparked a full investigation by HR, and after interviewing other co-workers in the department, they realized she had done all of it to have grounds to fire people within the department she didn't like. I just happened to be the first on the shopping block. The project she was passing off to other people, she was taking the credit for what they were doing to make herself look good. Those changes she was making to other people's work, HR realized that she was changing things to make it explicitly incorrect. You gotta love software that tracks changes and timestamps and lists the user. By the time she was fired, I had already found another job in a different department at the same company. It was a good gig, and my new manager wasn't a complete jerk. Eventually, I moved on from that company, but if anything, my time there taught me a very valuable lesson. Document, document, and document some more. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.